Hola, bienvenidos y salutations.
Buenos dias ustedes. Okay, we're excited to be here today. Soy Señor Scheel.
Y soy Owen Young.
Okay, and this is a project that we talked about a little bit last year. We're going to introduce ourselves a little bit and explain what our purpose is here. But we are very excited to have you listening to Español al Maximo.
See. So yeah, this is, as Senor Scheel mentioned, we have been working on this for quite some time, ever since the end of last year. It started more as just a random one-off idea to see if there was any substantial things that we could really talk about, specifically about AP Spanish literature, since that is a new class that our school is offering, and Senor Scheel is the one teaching it, and I am a first-time student with that.
Yeah, so a little bit about ourselves. So, obviamente, soy Señor Scheel. Soy profesor aquí a Batavia High School. This is actually my 14th year teaching Spanish at Batavia. I've also previously coached both girls and guys soccer. I'm also married. I've actually been married to my freshman high school sweetheart. So I've been dating my wife over half my life, and we have two great daughters. But very excited to continue on with the program and expand it as we've been working towards it moving forward. Okay, and I'm excited that Owen is here. We were looking at ways to be able to keep him involved and a couple other students as seniors who had already taken AP Spanish language. So Owen, why don't you tell us un poquito del tuyo?
Sí, gracias. Soy Owen, obviamente, y soy un estudiante a Batavia High School. I am a member of the band. I have been a member of the band. This is my senior year, obviously, and I've been a member of the band every single year. I've also obviously taken Spanish every year, but the reason I'm able to be in my fifth year currently is because I used to go to West Claremont, where they did offer Spanish in your eighth grade year, and then transferred over. So I, for the longest time, was the youngest kid in every single Spanish class. But here I am. Now I'm, for the first time, not the youngest in my Spanish class, and there are very few people. So it's a lot of fun. I'm very glad that Senor Scheel is here to help teach us about this subject. I've always loved Spanish, and as a matter of fact, I filled out a Spanish our side form the other day to be an officer, and that's part of what I wrote, is how I've just fell in love with the language because I love the idea of being able to communicate with others, and I think Spanish is obviously one of the fastest growing, most popular languages in the world, and I think it has a lot of value, and I just love the language in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, estoy emocionado tenerte en mi clase. And yeah, I do love that you were able to get your start early in eighth grade. I'm also very excited. So we just over the last few years have been developing that here at Batavia, but we now have it well set up, including a new eighth grade Spanish teacher. Not that you'll ever meet him,
Yeah.
but he.
My sister will. She's currently taking it.
Okay, all right. So no, I'm excited because what you and I are doing here this entire year is really intended for the current freshmen who were able to have a little bit of Spanish experience, and then your sister in particular, who's getting that full year start as we come through. And so the goal, you mentioned we have muy pocos estudiantes, solo hay tres estudiantes,
Sí.
just the three of us. But the goal is for this class to be a bigger offering and really a great challenge at the end of the high school Spanish career.
Yep.
All right, so Owen, si quieres or puedes decirnos cuál fue tu experiencia escolar de español aquí en Batavia. So tell us a little bit about how Spanish progressed, starting at West Claremont and as you passed through the years here at Batavia.
Sí. Con West Claremont era muy difícil y no interesaba, lo siento, en español para probablemente el año en total. Porque, I don't know, I just didn't find at the time Spanish to be too, I can't think of the right word here, but appealing, I guess, towards me. I more just saw it as, how a lot of people treat AP classes now, which is just, it's a class that's offered that's higher up, so I'm going to take it because it was offered to me. So yeah, that was also what I did with algebra that same year. Was just it's an honors class, high school, so I'm gonna go ahead and take it and see what I can do with that. I didn't assume that it would take me down here, especially to Batavia in particular, because we'd assume we were just gonna stay there. But I'm really glad that I did, because I got to meet you obviously and Senora Wells, the other Spanish teacher specify, and learn a lot. And obviously I've had my ups and downs in the language of either really loving it and just like talking it no matter what, because I have a cousin who, well, first of all, I have a second cousin who is from Colombia, and then I have a cousin who essentially did everything that I've done so far in Spanish and really knows the language. But I had my down times where I was either just not a fan of language for a little bit, or I was confused, because I know for a fact two moments that I mention a lot to people. In Wells' class once, we were reading a story, and for some reason while I was reading, I stopped on cuatro, and I couldn't remember what it meant. So I sat there for a solid 5 minutes until Wells pointed out on her hand that it was 4. And then the big one I show is, I remember before a Spanish Honor Society meeting, or after one actually, at school, Senor Scheel had asked me where I was, but for some reason I forgot what donde meant, so I just responded más o menos.
Yeah, those common mistakes absolutely happen, and we go say, yes, ¿qué pasa? And they're like, bueno. What's going on? Good. So you definitely have those, and sometimes it's just not being alert. I've certainly had my fair share of those through high school and college, and I have a similar path to you. So, I went to Turpin High School. Yo fui a Turpin, and, yo estudié Español 1, pues 2, 3, 4, y 5. And so we actually had a very similar structure here at Batavia, and we went Spanish 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then it's about 3 years ago, we were able to make the switch. We added AP Spanish Language and Culture. We find ourselves, you, I, Olivia, and Josh, are in the first ever segment of AP Spanish Literature. And that's the second course offered by College Board, who runs the AP program. And so what, as we talk about AP Spanish Language is a great offering, and that's well designed for high schoolers. They do very well with it statistically. AP Spanish Literature is a bit different as we get into it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you know of the course and kind of how you're feeling about it?
Thank you. I have. It's definitely very interesting for me, because we got obviously an outline sheet of reading, sort of explaining what the course was, what we had to do, what's on the test. And first of all, I have to say I'm very pleased that it's almost all writing, because that my one gripe with the AP Spanish language test was the audio recordings, because I don't know, something about it just made me feel very off, and I didn't feel like I could properly articulate. I've always felt a little better about listening and writing Spanish than I am about talking. I can definitely. It's just you've probably noticed I stutter a bit, and I'll go back on it a little bit because I can't really figure it out.
We absolutely all do. It is a struggle to break down that barrier and to get that balance of reading, writing, speaking, and listening. It is a hard one to get.
Yeah, and you said that it's mostly obviously, as the name implies, it's a lot of literature. It's around 36 pieces, you said?
Yes, I believe exactly 36 pieces of literature.
Yeah, that we have to know for the test, which goes back to the precise nature that Senor Scheel described about this, and how we need to really hone in, understand the themes, and what specifically each of these pieces of literature are talking about. Most of them are very historical and very like well known in society and used a lot. A lot of them are different ones that I've never heard of, like Y no se traga la tierra. That's one that I've never heard of before. Very interesting message about a child who works on was it a plantation?
No, it was just a farm.
Just a regular farm? Okay. Who ended up getting so angry with it that he cursed God and then figured he was about to be sent to the underworld. So that's a very interesting one. But a lot of it is, especially as someone who isn't a native speaker in a room with almost only native speakers, I have to like end up Googling a lot of it to figure out maybe what it means and just get another perspective on it. But other than that, I think I'm getting it. Es un poco difícil, pero pienso que empezar a comprender el curso.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and es un gran ejemplo. Hay un gran ejemplo con Y no se lo trago la tierra. Está escrito por Tomás Rivera. And Tomás Rivera, when he wrote this, it's interesting. AP Spanish language, I had you guys all reading La Casa en Mango Street, The House on Mango Street, by Sandra Cisneros. And that's arguably the most well-known modern piece of literature in reference to Chicano culture, and where you have these Mexican Americans that live right on La Frontera. And so she's kind of trademarked and is most well-known, not trademarked, but she's the most well-known, recognizable one. But Tomás Rivera is, a lot of people, a lot of Hispanics relate better to his work and say that it is better on target. They're all great, but it is very unique. It includes not just the perils of the situation, but as you mentioned, the religion, the spirituality, the beliefs that come together with it. There are a lot of things, and that is kind of what we're going for with this class, to not just understand what happened, but why. And it is actually very important to know, like, Y no se lo traga la tierra estaba escrito en, I don't know, los años 70, so about the 1970s, I believe it was right, 60s. So it's a relatively more recent thing that we have. But in AP Spanish, we're essentially covering literature from the last 600, 700 years. So we did start with la Edad Medieval, la Edad Media. And so actually, that's what we've been doing the last week and a half. And it's interesting. For me, I feel a little bit overwhelmed trying to balance all the classes. And for reference, I actually have AP Spanish language and AP Spanish literature, ambos, durante la tercera clase. Both of them.
We're in the closet.
It's a little bit better in the closet. Yeah. But yeah, you guys are in the office. And so it is a juggle for me trying to balance the two of those out. So I love that all three of you are amazing and play well with this, and you're all academic oriented. You're wanting to better yourself. You chose to be in this class to let me have this experience, and as you said, like, this will better set up your sister to hopefully take this class years down the road. But no, I'm very excited, and so I did start with those two works by Tomás Rivera, the other one being La Noche Buena, just to give a sense of the more modern feel, because these last two readings we did were written in the 1300s, 1400s. And that is a very different style of writing. And that's one of the things we talk about, is not just what is being said, but more how writing developed during these different time frames. And the creativity and ability to express oneself nowadays was not systemically in place, in the Middle Ages.
So, ¿cuáles partes tiene dos clases vez como? ¿Cuáles algunos partes difícil de este proceso?
So hay muchos. Hay gran variedad de cosas problemáticas. So primero, las lecturas, the readings are actually, I have read about half of them. A few years ago, 2 years ago, right before COVID, actually during COVID, during the first year, I finished up my master's degree from New Mexico State University. And it is a master's in Spanish literature. So the plus side for me is I actually have already read about half of the works on the AP list were actually on my list. And so I've read a number of other ones as well. But for me, that's, I spent 6 years reading about 115 different works of literature, and that's a lot to remember. And so as we go through, it's a struggle for me to reread, prepare, decide how I want to teach and get them ready for you all. And combined with that is the ability to get different assignments prepared, written, created in Google Classroom just to help the flow of things. So por lo más, yo probé, mi meta es trabajar con ustedes uno o dos veces cada semana. I really want to be in there once, maybe twice a week, but the other 3-4 days, I'm with the language class. So for me, that's the balance, is not just having it set up and having read enough to know what to set up, but be able to get you guys working while I'm working with the students that hopefully will be able to get to your level. AP Spanish language is very much about building that communicative skill, reading, writing, speaking, and listening, and breaking down that comfort level barrier. But it's very much more of an overview course. So when we have this set content, puede ser muy difícil para mí.
See, and this AP Spanish language class is a lot bigger than last year's.
It is. Yeah, last year, and I had a great group last year. We had 6 great students, and last year was interesting. Last year was the first time I did not have any native speakers in the class. So it was all students like you and I that grew our way up with Spanish in Cincinnati, Ohio, Batavia, in Claremont County for you. Hamilton County for me at Turpin High School, but regardless, it's the same system. We're learning Spanish from a non-native speaker. That was the same for me. I do like having native speakers. As you mentioned, our small group of 3, tenemos 2 otros estudiantes, uno que crecía en México y la otra que vivía 3 años en Nicaragua. And so when you have students that oftentimes or do in nature speak better Spanish than the teacher, it's great when you have that good relationship. You're able to bounce back and forth. And that's one of the things I like, not just for me, but for you as well, is, as you work through this, like you have some very good students that are able to help you bounce ideas off and look over things. So I feel really good about the group of 3 that we have that we're going through this trial run. It helps me as a teacher not only get the assignments ready, because I have all of the assignments I've done previously for Spanish language. Those are already created, and I can pick and choose what I'd like to do. But in creating new content for a new course offering, there is a lot that goes on to it. So
yeah, because I mean, definitely at first when, being told like, all right, you're now in your 5th year of Spanish and you're going to be doing it with 2 essentially native speakers, it can be a little daunting and a little intimidating when you're like, oh, cool. So I'm just going to sit there like, all right, I think I got it. But really in the end, it's not that. It's really more just you have a very valuable source of assistance there. Not only in a teacher who has studied it for years, but also people who have lived in that culture and are very comfortable with that language. So I have a lot of good people that I can get information from. So definitely not an intimidating thing, more of just a guiding thing.
Yeah, and I would say not just knowledgeable about those cultures, but they're both just outgoing, genuinely good people that like they love the culture and language and they love learning. And that's one of the things I can say is a profoundly important thing about what you just said. Like, you are learning how learning is supposed to be done. Like, you want to get better. Like, you are challenging yourself to learn for something, fortunately, you have an interest in. As you said, sometimes we schedule those classes like, hey, I'm supposed to take these types of classes. So I do truly hope you enjoy the content as we go through it for the next 6.5 months. But it is great, like the fact that you are looking at a situation that, as you said, could be daunting, and saying, yeah, let's do it anyways. Vamos, okay, let's go.
Yeah.
I think it's great, and it's going to benefit you tremendously down the road. Okay, so, as we go through, we've talked a lot about how this year is planned out, okay, and we did start with a little bit of the modern literature, pues la Edad Media, we just finished up. We only had 2 works from that.
All the same guy.
Yep. ¿Tienes pensamientos de la Edad Media?
No mucho, pero era muy interesante porque no leo mucho. So obviously AP Spanish literature and English literature were great for me. Pero pienso ahora, posiblemente pienso que me gusta más que español al lenguaje. I don't know. It's definitely a lot of reading. And like I said, I have to do a lot of translation, but that one specifically had a lot of interesting themes. I did like it was short. Era muy poco. Pero I did enjoy it. Like, I never felt too overwhelmed with that section. I thought there was a lot of religious focus, which kind of makes sense for that one. And then I know that I hate that I can't remember the name, but the fable, that one, that was the second one. You have the book of it. I can't remember the name of it.
As we go through,
that one was probably my favorite. It was I hit the mic. It was just so confusing, but eventually when you get it, you get like a feeling of triumphance. Oh, right, Conde Lucanor.
Yeah, Conde Lucanor was a good one. Don Juan Manuel, and it was interesting. As we talk, a lot of us grew up with Aesop's fables. I personally, and so there's another author, se llamaba Augusto Monterrosa, and he wrote a book called Oveja Negra y otros fabulas, and I enjoyed reading that immensely for my master's degree. But it was a little 1-pagers, 2-pagers. So Conde Lucanor was a 3 to 4 page. It was about 3 pages.
See,
simple, had a moral at the end. You could see where it was leading. But these fables are very much. This one you could see the darker connotations.
See
the poor dog, horse, and cat. But it's a different writing style. But like you said, I mean, we in AP Spanish language today, hoy nosotros discutimos el mal, el centro comercial. And I think you probably remember doing that, one day, like, we had this little 1-page read. Yeah, talking about malls in Chile versus the United States. And
I will say, it's not to interrupt, sorry, but it is very fun, like, sitting there and then I hear like bits and pieces of the lesson. I'm like, I remember that.
Yeah, you're in there in the office, and I'm definitely not known for being quiet, so sound travels through walls and windows.
I can write tips on a whiteboard and show it through the window.
No, they got to do their own learning. So, ellos tienen que aprender a sí mismo.
Sí.
But no, it is like you can remember back and see it. But you have these little fragments. So we might learn about Chile and then go to Nicaragua and then learn something about Spain and then go to Dominican Republic. And so you bounce around a lot and you get a nice variety. But I do like that we get to spend some more focused time and analyze not just what was written. Okay, obviously there's points to the stories that were written and how that was centered, but also even looking at how things were written at the time and by whom. That's going to be a big focus. So, nuestra próxima sección, nuestro próximo contento es el siglo XXVI, el Renacimiento.
Sí.
And when you look at literature from the Renaissance, sure, you think often about France and Italy during the Renaissance and the beginning of the age of exploration. So we do have some literature there in Spain, but a lot of what we're going to look at is, the literature from the New World. And you think about who's writing that. The only people that were writing things of worth in the New World were people of power, people of prestige. Not a lot of people traveled across the Atlantic without either being really good at war or having some sort of education and being able to plan out things out there. So I'm excited that we now see the perspectives and observations seen in this new world that had never been seen previously.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack with that. I think there's going to be a lot of, because I think when I think of the Renaissance, I do think of like art specifically. There's a lot of Renaissance art and talking about the exploration, like you said. So I think that's going to be one of the most exciting things for me. And yeah, that seems to be a trend with a lot of things that, as you mentioned, it's whom is writing it. Which that needs to be taken into account because maybe there's like some bias or it's someone explaining like, and then we came and conquered the savages or whatever, but it was really just this random tribe doing their best. Mm-hmm. So it really just depends on who is saying it. So you get a lot of interesting stories to read about and interesting pieces of art to look at that have a lot more deeper meaning. I think this is where, if the last one had a good amount of religion, I think this theme probably has one of the most religious influences.
Yeah, and you're not wrong. So probably the first 300, 400 years of literature we analyze, depending on what you say is the start date, is going to have a large religious background because those were largely and wholly the monks and friars were most of the ones doing the writing at the time. Nobility as well, but yeah, as we look back, and you make an excellent point looking at, all right, who in the New World was able to write? They were either religious by nature and looking to spread Christianity, or they were an educated conqueror such as Hernan Cortez, who defeated the Aztecs and conquered large parts of Mexico. And so you look at that, I'll be very curious to see what your observations are, because that is one of the readings we have, and seeing this is a guy who's known for destroying the Aztec Empire, but what is his writing style like, and how do we interpret that? And is it, as you said, could it be biased as savage and that perspective of who he conquered, or is it more of an observational overview? Mm-hmm. Those are absolutely things that I'm looking forward to sharing with you as we look through the year. And yeah, as we kind of get towards the end of this podcast, I'm excited that you guys, if you listen this far, gracias por escuchar por 30 minutos. Thanks for staying with us. But I do like the idea of us working our way through. Like, I think we came up with this great plan last spring to kind of check in monthly, okay, and have an episode where we just discuss a little bit more each time in Spanish, but also in English to help everyone get an idea what this course is about and everything else.
Yeah, almost like, we're going to treat this as more of like I guess I would call it a checkup, where if you wanted to get really loose terms, like a therapy session, just making sure we're all on the right pace of just checking in, seeing what's happening, seeing how we're going, what we think is going to happen, how it's been. So this episode obviously was more just the context, el contexto, to set up the future episodes. And I think the other ones are definitely gonna have more Spanish. This one was very much English, just to kind of introduce things. We're both very trying to understand this. Even me, as someone who has done like content creation and video stuff before, podcasting is something I haven't done much of. So this is all a very new experience to just be talking with someone and then have it recorded. But I think we're getting it.
Yeah, no, and as somebody that has his own streaming channel and Doc Fusion, somebody who's very tech savvy and looking to continue that after graduation, I think this that was one of the things we talked about, is this being just a great
Combination of the two.
Yeah, combination, but a great addition to your portfolio of your abilities. But no, I think it's great that we're going to check in with each other as we go through this process. So, gracias por escuchar
Sí.
Español al Maximo, Spanish to the max.
Yep. Sí, we'll be back in episode 2 at a different time, a un vez diferente.
Yeah. Hoy es, ¿qué día es hoy? El 12 de septiembre, so posiblemente la mitad de octubre.
Sí, mi monta favorita.
¿Tu mes favorito?
Sí, yeah.
El día de disfraces.
Sí.
Sei, yo voy a Disney World este octubre.
Oh, sí. Es mi cumpleaños.
Oh, okay. All right. Well.
Solo antes de Halloween.
Okay. So all right. Well, yo tendré que recordar este. I'll have to make sure I remember this. Yeah, and give you a shout out.
Ooh.
All right. Well, muchísimas gracias.
Gracias. Adiós y tengan un buen día.
Adios.